Hello again, lovelies. How are you all doing? Today, it's a different day. I know, same clothes. The law of sod conspired against me yesterday when I was here back for the first time in ages to assess what needed doing and more than anything to go and pick dry stuff. I got called away from the garden. It really is sod's law, isn't it? Anyway, today I'm back. We've had a few showers this morning, so I think things are going to be a little bit damp out there. But yeah, I'm just going to go for it today because, as I mentioned yesterday, we're now due a whole load more rain. So today, dry beans and chickpeas. So we'll go out there in a second. I'll show you how I pick my chickpeas because they can be quite fiddly. We'll pop back in here. I'm going to do a quick little chat, if there's time, about dry beans versus demi-sec beans, whether you're storing beans for food or for seed saving for next year, all the same principle. Just before we go out there, it's a little bit, you know what, it is a bit blowy, it's really overcast, it feels like it could rain again at any moment. It's a bit chilly. The dilemma, of course, with picking dry stuff that's a bit damp because of rain, yes, I'll be spreading it out at home, is, of course, at home it's starting to get a bit chilly too. I don't want to turn the heating on yet, not with the way fuel bills are going to be this winter. So, I will come on to that later. It just may affect filming and sound while we're out there. But just want to say, I was on my way down here this morning and obviously there's been a bit of a gap. So I just noticed it yesterday for the first time. On the little street I walked down, the little side street I walked down to get here to the garden, there are five skips. So for anyone outside of the UK, when we talk about a skip in the UK, we're talking about those great, huge metal kind of bins, basically. It's a huge metal bin. You pop one on your drive when you're doing your demo indoors or a bit of a refurb or whatever, put all your rubbish in it. So it's usually things like wood, bricks, old sinks, sink taps. Remember how I did my bathroom up with a pair of two pairs of Edwardian taps? Anyway, I got this big skip diving thrill as I was walking down the street. There's one of them, it's got a really, really lovely pair of French doors. I mean, I'm really, really hoping someone will hoik them out of the skip. I wouldn't put that in the skip. I'd put it next to it with a sign saying, "Please take me." Someone would love them. So anyway, I was having a good nosy in these skips. One of them's got a lot of bricks. I was like, ooh. Carried on getting here. And I thought, Vivi, stop it. I don't have any projects on the go. I don't have any in mind for the garden. I don't need any materials for the garden now. I mean, bricks are always handy, just for weighing down nets or cardboard in the winter. But yeah, I don't have any projects. And I was like, oh, I wish I had a project because there's some really good stuff. And then I was thinking, maybe have the French windows out so when I move house, because I'm hoping to move to the ground floor, if it hasn't got French windows, I can put these French windows in. And then I had to remind myself, firstly, I don't know when it's going to be. I don't know what I'm going to get. Where am I going to keep a pair of French windows? Really heavy, they're hardwood, really heavy. How am I going to transport them? Where am I going to keep them? There's no room at home for them. Could I put them in the shed? They're too big for the shed even, I think. Anyway, yeah, that thrill of seeing a whole load of skips and then that kind of, I don't have anything to build. I wish I had a building project. Anyway, I'm digressing. We've not even started the day. So, I think first things, I'm just looking out there now. So the dried beans, they've had the shower. So I think what I'll do first is I'll do the chickpeas. That will give there is a bit of wind out there. That'll give the beans a chance to just dry off a little bit, and they're not going to dry off a lot. Yeah, let's go and get these chickpeas harvested. I'm wondering whether I should put my wellies on. I can't be bothered changing. Let's just get out there. The weather really has changed. Oh my goodness. Just before I get stuck into the chickpeas, I'm going to have all the rocking core out. They need to come out anyway, but this whole bed, apart from the very top end where I've got the cove Trontuda, oh it's so windy, it's going to be a crop and drop bed. So all the leftover plant material is simply going to be chopped up and left on the surface of the bed to very simply rot down over winter. Or all my tools need sharpening. Do you remember a couple? Oh, this is right. The secateurs need sharpening. Let's just leave it in a pile to chop later. Remember the other day, 2 weeks ago, when I was going to do all my edges. My shears need sharpening. It's one of those things, I think. It's that kind of job. Definitely one of those kind of jobs at this time of year. Which made me think about, I might take some of my tools home. Because we're losing the light now, quite early in the evening. Work outside with the plants in the garden while it's light, and all the jobs like the sharpening of my tools, do it in the evening when it's dark, do it at home. So yeah, I think shears and secateurs home tonight for sharpening. Oh. Anyway, this will take me a few minutes, so I'll crack on with this. Sorry, I was saying, the secateurs needing sharpening have done something to my brain. I'm getting these out so that as I pull out all the chickpea plants, I've got somewhere to dump them. That's what I was trying to say. So rather than dump them on the rocking core plants, get the rocking core out first. There's always an order to do things in. It's not always obvious, but there is usually an order. Okay, let me get on with this and then I will bring you back over here when we're ready to start in the lovely chickpeas. The great thing about all this rain is, of course, it has massively softened the soil. Perfect for weeding. I'm not going to think too much about weeding today though. But as I go, if I see a real monster, I'll have it out. Interestingly though, I don't know. I don't have many weeds in the actual vegetable beds. It's all in the paths. Yeah, not sure. Oh my goodness, I think it's starting to spot rain again. Okay, let me just quickly show you how I'm doing my chickpeas. Most of them are still green, there's a few that are dry. I'm just going to get them all in together and I'll sort when I get home. I just pull off a branch. Each plant will end up with sort of 4 or 5 stems. Pull a stem off and then upside down into a bucket, just simply pull them off into the bucket. Like I said, they are a bit of a fiddly crop and it's quite possible I will expend more calories getting them off the plants now and then podding them when I'm at home than I get from them. But I love them. I think most of us are familiar with chickpeas, dried chickpeas, but oh my goodness, I plant them for having them green. Oh, it's really chucking down. I'm going to have to put you all indoors in the shed. Come on, let me pop you away. Oh, and there goes Poppy. Blimey. That's a bit of a damp, howly day out there. It's gone black overhead. It's not raining hard, it's just spits and spots. So it's certainly not enough to stop me doing the work I want to do today, but it's too spitty spotty to have you all sitting out there. You'll get wet and cold. I would always prefer to show, demonstrate in situ, in the garden, partly because the garden is prettier than the shed, but also it makes more sense. Back to the chickpeas. What I was trying to say is they're a multi-stemmed plant. Well, you'll get about sort of 5 or 6 inches of a stem and little branches off. I find the easiest way to harvest is snap a branch off, if you like, and then I sort of go down it. So that's your stem the right way. Turn it upside down, run my finger and thumb down the stem, pulls off the chickpeas, easy peasy. It does pull off quite a lot of the leaves as well, so there's a bit of sorting out once we get home. Fine. As I'm working, one of the reasons I was mentioning about clearing the rock and call bed, as I'm working, I'm setting all the spent stems right to the far end of the bed in the rocking core area, because I plant closely, I plant everything so closely, and sometimes the different stems from different plants, they get a bit entwined. So as I'm pulling them out to harvest that one stem, sometimes it will pull off a couple of the peas pods. So by setting everything right, the spent stuff right to the far end of the bed, when I finished, it gives me a chance, hands and knees job, to just go picking through the soil for any that I've missed, any that have dropped. You know, invariably I will have missed a couple on a few of those stems. It's just sod's law that I will have done. But you know what? Some critter or other, oh, let me move that compost, I need to get comfy. Yeah, some critter or other will come along and nosh on them. So I've got a real mixture in here. Let me just show you between the green and nearly dry. The nearly dry, any like this, I'm just going to set them aside. It's always back to this time priority thing, and preserving the harvest and doing myriad other things. So they will happily sit in their pods. They're not too damp. All of these, I'll just get them spread out on a tray in the window, and they can just keep drying in that, if we get any sunlight again. In that sunlight, it warms the area up. They'll dry in no time. They're just not, just looking, I took my cardigan off because I was getting sweaty. I balled up on there and Rusty's now looking at it to make a bed. Yeah, they're not a priority because they're dry. These ones are the priority. I want to get them out pronto. They are a real fiddle. I love that pop. Most pods contain, oh, this one's quite small and underdeveloped, but most pods contain 1 pea. Every now and again you open a pod and it's a 2er, and it's dead exciting. As you're podding, there's a lovely sort of lemony, citrusy, zesty smell, almost appley as well. It's gorgeous. It will take ages. So again, it's like I was saying about sharpening my tools. We're getting to that time of year when by sort of 6:30 we've lost the light for gardening, and we're spending more and more of our evenings indoors. Cheerio, Rusty. So yeah, let's have these jobs. Put the radio on, put some music on. Oh, that's Rosie. You tell him, Rosie. Rusty and Rosie are brother and sister, you'd never know it. Anyway, yeah, they will take a while, but they're so worth it. Just on the subject of worth it. Oh, and sorry, just to say about storing, I'm going to have a little slug. got a bit down there. The dry ones, once I've got time to pod them, just store them in a glass jar like I would any of my other dried produce. The green ones, if I can resist eating every single one of them as I pod them, like any of my demi-sec beans, I'll just put them in one of my little takeaway tub trays, just pretty full, and that would be the equivalent of, actually it's slightly more than the equivalent of a tin of chickpeas. But yeah, pop them in there, straight in the freezer. No blanching, no fussing. They've already had enough fuss just to get them out of their pods. So yeah, dry ones, glass jar, airtight glass jar. Green ones, freezer. Not forgetting to set some of the dried ones aside for sowing next year, of course. So, yeah, I'm quite often asked about chickpeas, are they worth it or not? And I thought, I had a comment from a woman a few weeks ago, I've lost track of time, and she was just asking about, what was she asking? Oh, she was asking me about my lentils, which, as you know, too much faff. I did them for a couple of years. I enjoyed the harvest, but like way too much faff. Too much faff. If I did nothing other than farm and produce food, I would. But when you've got all sorts of other things going on, nah, too faffy. Anyway, she was asking me about that because she was asking about plant-based protein, and I suddenly thought, oh, I've written notes, I've got it on my pinboard, it's a planned video, I don't know when it will be. You know, as we move into winter and there's far less time in the garden, I've got whole lists and lists of videos I'd like to bring to you. Excuse me. One of which, I'd like to do a video about plant-based protein. You know, what we can grow for ourselves, what's worth growing in terms of, you know, our protein bang for our buck, as it were. In terms of the chickpeas, a cup is going to be about between 15 and 20 grams of protein in a cup of chickpeas. So it's pretty much a third of your daily requirements for a woman. I'm not sure what the men's requirements are. Double it, I don't know. But yeah, it's about a third of my daily requirements for protein I can have in just one cup of chickpeas. Brilliant. They're not a hardship to eat, are they? So yeah, I grow them because of protein. I started growing them, I think, 4 years ago. I'm just thinking about my crop rotation. They're in the same bed where I did the first ever growing, so it must be 4 years. I grew them the first time sort of out of curiosity. I obviously like them because I've kept growing them despite the faff. Not the harvest isn't too much of a faff, but the processing is, without doubt, it is a faff. Why do I bother? I think there's a number of things. One, I adore their foliage. They have the prettiest, I wonder if I've accidentally got some in here. They have these beautiful sort of frondy, let me try and show you, frondy, delicate leaves. Beautiful, beautiful foliage. So they look gorgeous. I love them for how they look in exactly the same way as I love fennel for how it looks. No fennel this year. So yeah, I love the foliage. And then they have the prettiest, tiniest little white flowers. Again, gorgeous, so attractive in the garden. And the bees go mad. They go absolutely mad for these teeny tiny chickpea flowers. I don't know how the bees get in them to get what they want, but as soon as they start flowering, boy oh boy, it's just a swarm of bees every time. It's lovely. So I would say, you know, if for no other reason, grow them for how beautiful they are and for how much they attract the pollinators in. I'm not sure in terms of compatibility with other plants, but it's one of those things you think you almost want to grow a few in each bed for the prettiness and for drawing in the pollinators, and then of course we get a harvest. The other thing about them is they are so easy. I mean, they are an absolute idiot's plant to grow. This year was a bit of an anomaly because I sowed all my seeds second week of May, and then we had 2 weeks of rain non-stop, so the vast majority of the seed rotted in the ground. That's really unusual. Normally, about the middle of May, just stick the seeds straight into the soil, cover them over, walk away, and then I completely leave them alone until now, sort of end of September, just going into October. They don't need anything from me, apart from watering, if it's a really dry year. There was a year, I think 3 years ago, or might have even been that first year, I had always thought of them as a plant from a hot place. I mean, I kind of associated them with India, maybe. I think partly because of the foods I eat with them in. So I'd kind of thought, oh, I won't need to water them very much. They do need watering when it gets really hot and dry. Temperature-wise, they seem to tolerate... Well, look, they've tolerated this cool, wet summer. They've tolerated when I've given them water. They've tolerated when we've had really hot, dry summers, like the last couple of years. So they're easy. Put the seed in the ground, let them grow. They hate competing with weeds. So in those early stages, as they're shooting, I'm really, really careful to pick out any weeds. But like I was saying when I was doing the rock and core, my beds seem to be relatively weed-free. It's the paths that have been getting weedy. Anyway, yeah, so super duper easy. And what's really great is, I don't want to jinx myself, let's whisper it so they can't hear. They've never ever been attacked by slugs and snails. I've never had birds pecking on them. Yeah, no, literally no pest damage from anything ever. When I first sow the seeds, I cover the ground with either mesh hoops or sheets of metal mesh, whatever, just to keep the cats and foxes off. But otherwise, no. Leave them alone. They do absolutely fine. So look, I think they're a lovely thing to grow. I obviously do, because I grow them. In terms of having the chickpeas green, I've never seen them for sale in shops green, either fresh or frozen. And they are so beautiful green. They're a real delicacy and treat. So yeah, why not have a small patch of the garden which is just for real treat? I mean, it's not a huge bulk that I've harvested today, but it's only, let's think now, it's maybe about 1.5 meters of length of the bed by about 1 meter wide. It's a relatively small patch of the garden that I give them, and I have got a lovely harvest. So yeah, I grow them because to find them green in the shops, not going to happen. They're a beautiful plant to look at. The pollinators love them. They're dead easy to grow. They seemingly have no pest issues. It's a no-brainer, isn't it? Apart from all the podding. The first year I grew them, let's just go back in time a minute. Back in time. I hadn't known about eating them green. I hadn't known how gorgeous it was to eat them green. So I was growing them thinking ahead of they'll be for drying. And I left them, I think it must have been about mid-October. I was keeping an eye on them. They were going from green to sort of a white to a brown and dry. I was like, oh, yeah. Got to that stage. They were all looking dry. Brilliant, do my harvest. Went to do the harvest, and it was a whole bed of empty pods on the soil. The whole lot had been stripped, I'm assuming, by mice. So yeah, the following year I thought I'm going to have to harvest earlier because I don't want to lose the lot again. And it was a kind of a mix of half dry, half green. And it was then that I discovered how gorgeous they are green. So nowadays I like to harvest them pretty much all green, just a few dried for seed saving. Now just quickly, actually I just need to check something, excuse me a second. Oh my goodness, this is a first. This is our little Rosie. This is a little bowl, it's just a few little nibbles, it's not a feed as such, but this is what Rusty was having earlier. This is amazing though, hey little girl, because Rosie is such a timid little girl. I mean, it's taken me about 5 years to be able to even stroke her head. She never comes in the shed, never. She's an outdoor cat, completely outdoor. She doesn't even go inside in her own home. Oh, sweet girl. I feel very, very honoured, little one. Uh-oh, Rusty's on the prowl. You're not going to cause trouble, are you, buddy? Uh-oh. Right, I'm going to put the camera away because this might get hissy. Oh, but I'm so happy that Rosie has... That's Rosie's growl. I'm so happy that Rosie is feeling safe enough to come in here these days. Sweet girl. Okay, so a quick word on storing. And this applies for beans as well. You hear me talking a lot about storing demi-sec or dried. Now, I know a lot of you know all this already. Of course you do. If you do, you can turn off. Or don't turn off, stay with me, just have a cup of tea and chill out. I'm talking, this is aimed at more newer gardeners or gardeners who are having their first garden next year. Yes, demi-sec. Its literal translation means half dry. It's not actually that good a translation because they're not even half dry. It's all about capturing that bean. Let's talk about beans instead of chickpeas for a minute. It's all about capturing that bean when it's at its fattest, its juiciest, its yummiest, and getting it stored in that state rather than storing it dry. I would prefer to store everything that way. It just makes life so much easier. It takes the faff out of things. Well, apart from the faff of podding all the chickpeas. But yeah, it takes the faff out of things when it comes to cooking and planning. When I store them demi-sec, I pod them, stick them in one of my little takeaway tub tray things, whack them in the freezer, job done. When I come to cook with them, depending on the size of them, obviously the Coco de Pampola are like this, and then the Gigantes are like this. Anywhere between a 5 and 15 minute steam or boil. And they're ready to add to whatever dish you're using them in. A soup, a casserole, whatever it is. Whereas using them from dry, of course, you've got to sort of think ahead, plan ahead. Oh, I need to soak them overnight. Or if I'm going to be cooking later that day, well, I can start the soak at 8 in the morning, and by 4 in the afternoon I'm ready to boil them for an hour or 2 hours or however long, and then I can start cooking with them. The way my life is, I'm rarely that organised in terms of for cooking. It's kind of, cooking is always so low down on the list for me. I tend to be quite ad hoc, you know. Suddenly at 8 in the evening I think, oh my goodness, I'm starving hunger, I need to make something. So to just grab a tray out of the freezer, a portion out of the freezer, whack them in the pan for 10 minutes to steam or whatever, great. Of course, the other thing with some varieties like Coco de Pampol, the texture is also so much better that way. Also, it's a great way of using up gluts of beans. If you've, the ubiquitous runner bean in the UK, by the end of the season, everybody is sick at the sight of runner beans. Everyone's sick of eating them. You've been eating them every day. You've been chopping them up and freezing them every day. You don't want to eat a single another runner bean. But here's the thing. Don't think of them, at that stage, don't think of them as the pod. Because as the season goes on, they're starting to get a bit tough and gnarly and stringy anyway. So have a mind shift and think to yourself, I'll leave them on the plants a little bit longer if they're still green and we're still getting, rain and what have you. let the beans fatten up, and think of it as the bean instead of the green pod. And then use it as you would any beans, you know, as a substitute for a kidney bean in a chili son carne or curry, casserole, however you use your beans, soups, yum, yum, yum. And the other thing about using the bean rather than the pod, I grow a couple for the pod, the rock and core, the yellow waxy pod, the helder, but generally, pardon me, apart from those two, all of my beans are grown for the bean, not the pod, because the bean is where I'm going to get my protein. The pods, they're yummy, they're tasty, full of vitamins and minerals, but really low in protein. Whereas the bean inside, if I let it grow, oh, it packs a punch. Similar to the chickpeas, 15, 20 grams of protein. Brilliant. So yeah, I prefer to store them demi-sec in the freezer. However, I always store some dry. I think I probably store about two-thirds to three-quarters demi-sec and a third to a quarter dry, just in case all of my freezers break. I have 3 freezers. If they all break, and they all break at the same time, and I can't get a replacement for a week, or have power cut for a whole week, very, 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 very unlikely, but it's, you know, it's a good idea to have a few dried as well. For me, that's my only options for storing demi-sec in the freezer or dried just in my glass jars. They're a really low acid food, so to preserve them, to bottle them or can them, as you guys say in the States, it would require it would require pressure canning. They need canning under pressure. Or if you're using bottles, they would need a whole lot of acid adding, or some other medium adding to store them in, because they are so low acid they won't preserve. We're kind of thinking along the lines of vinegar, but then what you're doing is you're going to end up with pickled beans. Oh, I can't think of anything. Oh, I'm not a pickle fan. The only pickle I like is capers that I make from my nasturtium seeds. No. Pickles, chutneys, keep them. Ugh, yuck. Anyway, digressing. So yeah, that's why I harvest at the stages I harvest, and the way that's why I preserve the way I do. Demi-sec, quick, easy, no planning required. I find a better texture. Dried, good backup, just in case. We always want our backup. And of course, I'll always have some dried, because they're my seeds for next year. And I mentioned the 3-day freezer method. I'll put a little cardy thing up that links back to the video I did about the Kawanga Institute seed saving method, which I also use for all the dried beans that I'm saving for eating. Whether I'm eating them or saving them for seed, they'll get the same treatment. So, right, this has been quite a wordy one in the shed today, hasn't it? I realise. I wish I didn't strip that one very well, did I? Got half the branch in there. I would always prefer to be outside with you when it's a garden video, but it's just not that kind of weather. But at least we had a few minutes out there together, didn't we? Now I'm going to send you all toddling off, and I'm going to go back out there. I'm going to get all those beans down. Pretty much every single last one of them. I'm going to be out there for ages. Wish me luck. Oh, yay for harvests. It's so good, isn't it? You know, it's funny. Yeah, life's been a bit tough and hectic. It's been tough and hectic for ages. But just a few minutes, a couple of hours in the garden, gathering harvests, it makes everything right again, doesn't it? All right, lovelies, I really am waffling. I'm going to go. Be well, stay well, happy harvesting, dodge those showers. If it's only a little shower, hey, we're not made of soap, are we? Go out there. We're not going to dissolve. Go out there and enjoy it. however you possibly can. See you all again really soon, I hope. Until then, yeah, please look after yourselves. Cheerio.